Today is February the 26th, 2014, and it is now the occasion for the reading of PPM number 14, originally 4701.26.04. Yesterday, in the yesterday's meditation, I talked a bit about, well, in my commentary I was talking about going into the zone and the differences in terms of the writing experience itself, and how I could tell from reading yesterday's that I had sort of found myself into that modality where I felt very much that I was close to the matter at hand as I've been exploring it, and that is to say this phenomena called the excess of being. And in yesterday's meditation specifically, I continued to develop the idea of evocative speech, which is a way of describing a certain kind of dialogue, a certain kind of dialogic event, as I call it, in which the learning that I'm most interested in is taking place. So there are all sorts of different kinds of dialogue, and in yesterday's meditation, I drew attention to one kind of dialogue, that is to say the dialogue that is very structured. We can call it the dialectic approach, short questions, short answers, moving along in a certain way, to contrast with the sort of dialogic event that I'm talking about. Lately, in the work I've been doing most recently, where I've been talking a lot about music-making philosophy, which is a category that I have arrived at from two paths that sort of overlap. The first being Plato, again. I guess it's true what Whitehead said, that all paths, all philosophy is a footnote to Plato. Well, if that's the case, it certainly would be an example of that, because so much of my work seems to be not derived from, but inspired by Plato. And the dialogue, the Phaedo, the beginning of that dialogue, this is the dialogue in which Socrates is his last days in prison before he's executed by the Athenians. And in the beginning of the dialogue, the Phaedo, there's this recollection of Socrates having told his friends who come to visit him for the last time that he has indeed been writing poetic lyrics, because they ask him, "Oh, it's rumored that you've been writing some poetry while you've been here in prison." And Socrates says, "Yes, indeed, it's true. I have been. All my life I've had this dream, vision, or we could call it a muse, that visits me, a voice that says to me, 'Socrates, make music,' or 'practice music.'" And he goes on, "And my whole life I understood that that meant to do what I was doing, which was to engage in a kind of, philosophy, which I understood to be the highest art, that is to say, the highest way of making music. Highest, not in the sense of being high, although one could say that, but in the sense of hierarchically, the top. There is no better way than philosophy in terms of the art of making music. So Socrates made music. He understood this to be what he was doing, which was a kind of philosophy, of dialogic philosophy, inquiry, exploring the ideas of others. But he says, as I was visited again by this dream figure, this voice came to me again while I was in prison, and it insisted again that I make music. And what he says is, it seems to be the case that if this voice continues to urge me on to make music, there's two possibilities. One is that it's telling me, she said, and the figure is feminine, that she's saying, continue to do what you're doing, don't stop what you're doing, keep at it, keep going. And then, in fact, that's what led him to where he was in prison, awaiting his execution, right? Because, in fact, when he was given the choice to leave Athens, he said, "Listen, wherever I go, I'm going to do the same thing, and there's no other place that I could possibly do what I'm doing in the way that I'm doing it but Athens, so I have to be true to myself. I'm a philosopher, and philosophy is meant to be done here in Athens, so if philosophy is what's leading me to my death, then I'm going to stay and face the music of a different sort. So he says, it could be that. It could be that the voice is just saying, keep going to the end, or the voice could be saying, Socrates, make music, in the sense of, you still haven't been making music, Socrates. And so he said, so in order that I don't leave this earth, having not done what I was supposed to do, which was to make music, and I thought I was, well, perhaps what the voice was meaning was that I should make music in the sense of some other form, and so I decided that maybe what the voice meant was I should write lyrics, do poetry. And so my understanding, I've been inspired by this for the last couple of years, and it does actually, I mentioned Ion in yesterday's meditation as, this figure that doesn't know what he's doing, and he's only just sort of taken over, his soul's just sort of taken over, and he performs these rhapsodies, he's a singer of Homeric songs, doesn't know what he's doing, he's just sort of overwhelmed and taken away and in the performance, and the problem, Plato is sort of indicating, is he can't step back and give an explanation for what he's doing. And so I've been interested in the relationship between philosophy and poetry since the writing of this and before that, but more recently, in the last couple of years, I've been really focusing on this notion of a Socrates who makes music. Nietzsche, in Birth of Tragedy, this is an important figure for Nietzsche. And in fact, tomorrow when I go to Chicago, I'm going to be presenting a paper which I believe is called Feeling the Funk, enacting Nietzsche's prophecy of a music-making philosophy. And so I'm going to be presenting on this. So Nietzsche is the other source, and he sort of gives this sort of prophetic indication of a possibility of a music-practicing Socrates, who that would be a figure or a persona in the future, so to be. So it's more of a sense of what it could be. And I sort of, looking back at Being and Learning and looking back at this writing, I sort of understand now that what I was up to was an attempt to undertake something like a music-making philosophy that really sort of blurred the lines between poetry and philosophy, and it was inspired in those ways. And so the dialogue, though, that I'm most interested or the dialogic form of learning that I'm most interested in is something akin to music making along the lines of improvisational jazz, right? So that's really important to me. And yesterday in the in the meditation, I called attention to evocative speech that is sort of happening in dialogic, this particular kind of dialogic learning as dramatic. And so I talked about that this dialogic form of learning is something I might call the art of freedom, following Hannah Arendt, and thus is a dramatic performance of speaking and listening, and in that it creates plurality. And then I went on to talk about drama. So in today's meditation, I sort of glanced at it, which I just wanted to have a look to see where I was going, which wasn't part of the plan originally, but today I decided that I would go in that way. And so in today's meditation, I pick up this theme of evocative speech and dialogic, the dialogue and the dialogic learning that happens, that's propelled by that evocative speech as a kind of drama. So without further ado, and with the sun shining behind me on this very cold day in Portland, Maine, let's go on with PPM14, Poetic Phenomenological Meditation, number 14. Originally written February the 26th, 2004. The drama of evocative speech evinces learning as the appearance of the not yet. It shows clearly why the condition of learning enables the overcoming or the turning around of one's place in relation to what has been, tradition. Learning is the possibility of leaping beyond tradition, beyond the fixity of the social script's narration that assigns us roles. The drama of evocative speech opens up the play of possibility. Learning is the drawing out or emergence of our inclination to create, to seek, to acquire, to go beyond. We are inclined or disposed toward the performance of free play, to the play of freedom. This free play appears when we are enjoined by evocative speech. With our judgment held in abeyance, we are released into the condition of discovery. In the hearing of evocative speech, we are drawn into the magic of dramatic performance. Dramatic in the sense of being vivid, stirring, and thereby catching and throwing us beyond ourselves. The magic of evocative speech is identified in what occurs after the moment of provocation has given way to wonder. To be struck with wonder is to be enchanted. Evocative speech is an enchantment. It is thus a kind of celebratory song, a singing or intoning. The saying of evocative speech intones, strikes the keynote with the said. Nothing, woo-ee-woo, from the first not a thing is. The words that transport us beyond what is to what is not yet. Herein is the hermeneutic horizon of possibility, the condition of learning, the location of what is not a thing, the location where not a thing is. Su, emptiness. The free play of learning into which we are released by evocative speech is opened up for us by an enchanting intonement that is an expression of a conjuring art. Evocative speech intones through invocation, but invoke is a particular kind of calling, vocare. To invoke is both to call out, as in make a supplication, to call on, but also means to declare something, a relation, to be binding or in effect. Further, invoke is to appeal for a confirmation. In every sense, invoke designates the relation we maintain with being, but this range of meaning indicates the range of our responses to this relation, specifically the uncertainty that comes forth from the mystery to call on, but also means to declare something, from the mystery which prevails throughout this relationship. Let me read that again. In every sense, invoke designates the relation we maintain with being, but this range of meaning indicates the range of our responses to this relation, specifically the uncertainty that comes forth from the mystery which prevails throughout this relationship. It is a game of hide and seek that can overwhelm. We appeal for confirmation, but we can only wait, repose ourselves in the releasement of our will and judgment. When we repose, we find ourselves at rest, composed, with a dignified calmness. But to repose is also to place confidence or trust in something, a person, or a thing, or a phenomena. The releasement of the will, the silencing of the juridical voice, is the leap of trust we make into this mystery of our relationship with being. Learning unfolds with this leap. The leap is our response to the tidings we receive from the first questions. In learning, we embrace the mystery of the emptiness and watch with dignified calm as our temples of certainty are deconstructed. Hermeneutics is destruction. That's a quote from Heidegger, and that's how I end it. So, it's becoming sort of interesting to me how I'm concluding these meditations, where I'm sort of really coming back. And for those of you that are just joining me, so to speak, this is the reading of a set of daily meditations, collection rather. It was part of an experiment that I did 10 years ago. And I'm reading them again to sort of commemorate that experience. And every day I'm taking them up. And I've resisted the temptation. I have to be candid here. I've resisted the temptation of doing like a couple of readings and then putting them out on the day that they correspond to. I've just, I an hour and a half this afternoon. Why don't I just read 3? And response to self, don't do that. That's not how it works. So it's really has to be done on a daily basis. And like today, I sort of remembered, in the early part of the afternoon that, oh yeah, that's got time to read the meditation. So anyway, coming back, I'm realizing that there was certainly a process that it was unfolding, and I have to say 2 things looking back on this, and it's something that I could have and should have thought about as I was editing, which is to say that I know from having written it, obviously, and going back and reading it, that there are these intense moments of repetition. Now, I do need to think about that so that I can make some more, maybe a more thoughtful commentary on what's happening there. How, in the sense in which I come right back and almost verbatim repeat something that has been written before, or combine ideas and sentences in such a way that it almost sounds as if it's the exact same thing that I've written before. Something like and I'm ending now in that way. So, whereas in the first couple of meditations I was ending with a question, these last couple of meditations are ending with a very condensed sort of conglomeration of previous ideas, so that it's almost like the formation of some kind of like a gem, right? Which is it happens over time, and it's the increased pressure that's being put on certain ideas, and they're being condensed and condensed and condensed. And so, the image that's coming to mind is the formation of a gem. That's not I'm not making a self-congratulatory moment to say, oh, my writing is like, the formation of diamonds. That's not my point. It's just, again, what just came to me. And what just came to me was the sense of, okay, so, at the end of these meditations, I'm taking sentences. The sentences that are being written are sort of bits and pieces of things that have been written before. So in the way that you have that sort of formation, this geometric formations, they're sort of placed together. And not only that, but the ideas in that sense, as I get to the end of the meditation, it just seems like it's condensed in a very intense way. So for example, I come back to the last couple sentences, the releasement of the will, the silencing of the juridical voice is the leap of trust we make into our relationship with being. So the mystery of the relationship with being has been something that's sort of fundamental, right? And it's key. The releasement of the will and the silencing of the juridical voice, again, those are two parts of something that I've already said before, now combined in one sentence. The releasement of the will and the silencing of the juridical voice is now the leap of trust we make into the mystery of being. Learning unfolds this leap. And leap is the response to the tidings. Again, the tidings, the tide we receive from the first questions. Goes back to a couple days ago. And then in learning, we embrace the mystery of the emptiness and watch with the dignified calm as the temples of certainty are deconstructed. Hermeneutics is deconstruction. And that sentence, which is from Heidegger, where deconstruction is capitalized and there's an exclamation point at the end, has to this day been something that is kind of one of those aphorisms for me that I just deploy whenever it's appropriate. Hermeneutics is destruction. My understanding is that that's a sentence that is very much at the heart of what later gets called deconstruction by Jacques Derrida, who was a careful reader of Heidegger. So that's one comment I would make. The other thing I would make is that in this, so I begin by sort of focusing more on this idea of drama, and I thought it was kind of an interesting sort of work that I did here with the notion of drama as a drama as play. So we say, we call a work of drama a play. And so here I'm playing with this notion of the drama, and what's new, I think, here, and what's important is that I'm focusing on the turning, right, which was the first question, is the turning towards being's excess, or being turned around and towards being. That this turning now involves a turning from tradition. Again, another theme that I continue to work with, and just this morning in writing, I'm working on a paper that I'm going to be presenting in New Mexico in a couple weeks at the Philosophy of Education Society. I was talking about this work, this philosophy, as being anarchic insofar as it is a deconstruction of archic terminology. And inspiration for that particular move in the paper that I'm working on came from reflections on the meditation from yesterday, where I was talking about the methodology of working with first terms. So what I'm doing then is saying, okay, the first terms are fundamental. They are the principes, right? They're the first terms that were spoken. But the work I'm doing is one in which it's not simply a rearticulation, an orthodox sort of rearticulation of those terms. The point is to put those terms in play with one another, like tones or musical notes, and in doing so, to bring them into life, in effect, right? So, they've sort of become stale or worn out, or maybe just ossified or petrified, right? So a lot of these terms from ancient philosophy are like fossils, right? They're like the fossils of a leaf on a rock that you find, that where it's they're just hardened into the stone of time. And so part of what I'm doing is saying, okay, let's sort of revive these terms, but in reviving them, that means they have to take on a new life, right? And a life that is resonating with my experience and the world as I move through it. And so, in a sense, that becomes anarchic, not in the political sense, but in the sense that it is sort of against the authority of the weight of the past, if you will. So the force that wants to ossify, or the force that wants to fossilize these ideas, is a particular kind of almost like a gravitational force, and so that would be something like the archic force, right? It keeps things in place. So if you think of like an archway, going back then again to this idea of the threshold, an arch as having a keystone, and the arch being held together by the certain force that pulls these that holds it all together. Well, an anarchic would be sort of like the move through the threshold, where you take out the keystone, let's say, of the idea, whatever that is, and you run for cover, run to the side. This is a side note. I saw this very interesting documentary on the building of the dome in the cathedral in Florence, and they were talking about how they had moved away. At that point, they didn't use a vaulted ceiling. And in the story, they talked about that the vaults were created in a very interesting way. They were used humongous wooden frames that they then built up to the top of the cathedral, and then they set the stones of the vault, and then they said that when it was all said and done, they would pull out the wooden frame and literally take off, because they said, I think about 45% of the time the thing would just come crashing down from whatever it was, 180, 200, however many feet in the air. And so in this way, that's sort of like a sort of nice anecdote to describe the work of the threshold scholar, right? The scholar that undertakes this work, that is to say, of anarchic philosophy, insofar as they pull out the stone, but deliberately to bring down the arch, to bring down the arc. And so all that to say that what was introduced here in this meditation was this idea of moving beyond tradition, or moving against tradition, or turning away from tradition. So not moving against tradition, because I think that implies a whole other thing. So the specific claim I think that's coming out here is that this turning that happens towards the excess of being is a turn towards the present and the future. And so the leap then that I referred to at the end is the leap beyond tradition, and then beyond the fixity of the social script's narration. So here then playing with the idea that in the cultural and social sense, we have these scripts, right, that define who we are, what we do, and so the drama of evocative speech is like a play of possibility. So it's an improvisational, right? So we're not reading from a script, we're being improvisational. And so I kind of enjoyed that whole move there with the free play of evocative speech, drawn into the magic of dramatic performance, dramatic in the sense of being vivid, stirring, and thereby catching and throwing us beyond ourselves. The magic of evocative speech is identified in what occurs after the moment of provocation, and then I sort of go on talking about enchantment, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of wordplay, which I suppose is the play. Now that I've mentioned improvisation, that's another probably sort of significant and accessible way of talking about this writing, which is to say that it's improvisation, right? Just like the commentaries. Okay, so wow, I went for 25 minutes. That's a record for this commentary and this reading, and that's going to do it for PPM number 14.